All right, so in this week's edition of the Air with Brian Gregoire interview series, I had the pleasure of sitting down and having a great conversation with Brandon Kennedy, who's the director of player development at UNC. He went into depth about what his position looks like as a director of player development, what goes into it, what his responsibilities are, as well as what his approach is to crafting the perfect player development plan and how people can get involved in player development as a profession. I got to work with Brandon when I was an intern with Alabama football. We built a relationship there, and so it was great to get back and catch up with him in this interview. I hope you have as much fun watching this interview as we did making it. Enjoy. All right, so we're back with the Air with Brian Gregoire interview series. Today, I've got Brandon Kennedy, who's the director of player development for UNC football on. We're going to talk a little bit about the development sides when it comes to football on the field, what goes into that, to developing student athletes, and how people can get involved in that profession. But Brandon, it's great to have you on.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. I'm very happy to have you on here. Pick your brain a little bit. Since this is one of those positions I feel like the player developments, it's a position that's a little more internal. Not as many people are aware of the position as they are, coaches, coordinators, strength coaches. So for that reason, and I think it's really fascinating and cool to get involved with. For that reason, tell me a little bit about what you do on a day-to-day basis and what that job looks like.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll start by saying this. Every day in player development looks different. Like seriously, like now that we're out of the season, it looks different. But I'd say the main things that I work with is anything off the field: housing, financial aid, parking, game tickets, working with parents, any student athlete well-being, whether it's disciplinary stuff or whether it's issues within the team, issues outside, like whether it's law enforcement in the community. So I deal with everything, and I look at myself as a filter, so I catch everything and then I just send it to the right places. So that's kind of how I describe my job to people.
No, that's a great way to look at it. Like it's you got to be very adjustable to do it. You wear a lot of different hats. I mean, well, fun fact, Brandon and I worked together at Alabama. And I was an intern and he was working on the academic side for Alabama. And I was interning in player developments. One of my first days on the job, I had to help one of the athletes for the football team get their credit card set up. You never know what you're gonna have to do. Bring people back to the airport. Like it's one of those very on the fly jobs. You never know what it's gonna look like each day, but it's at the end of the day, like it always feels rewarding.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. I love that about that. That's the reason why I got back into it, just to get back to players because I was once in their shoes to kind of help guide them through their journey and their experience as a student athlete.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome, and it must feel really fulfilling to be back in that stage again. From being an athlete yourself, giving back, kind of reciprocating the favor. Like that's gotta feel really good.
Yeah, most definitely. Yes.
So you were like you mentioned, you were a student athlete. You played football at Alabama and Tennessee, um, which is that is I gotta say that's one hell of a combo.
Yeah,
Going from Alabama to Tennessee, that is one hell of a combo. There's been some transfers in the past. I'm like, wow, that's a doozy. That's definitely a doozy. But when
yeah.
when you were playing football, how much attention did you give to what your life would look like afterwards professionally?
So I would definitely say I thought about it more than the average player, but still not enough. I try to tell guys all the day, like, make sure you use your resources and build connections before you get out of football. And those things I did, but I didn't really, there was so much more I could have done in college. And that's kind of why I'm in this space now to be able to kind of guide athletes to see there is more connections, resources, and things you could use before you get out of college football. So I would say, man, it was more than the average. I remember my last year in 2020 at the University of Tennessee, I asked if I could intern with the player development, the person director of player development we had there. And then I also wanted to get into sports psychology because I had my master's from Tennessee in that. So basically, I did like a two-part internship where like 2 or 3 days out of the week I'd be one, then I'd be one for like one day or other. So I was able to kind of get into that space. But man, like looking back, there was so much more I could have done and taken advantage of. Now that I'm actually in the player development space and I get to see all the resources, the liaisons I'm with on campus, like it's so much I could have got involved in. So that's why I say that piece.
Well, especially like I think that's something that's important for student athletes to be aware of. You know, when you're in that building, when you're in that facility, in that program, you're around everything. Those touch points are everywhere. You know, every day say you're a football player at Alabama. Every day you're around strength and conditioning. Every day you're around nutrition. You're around sports science, player development, coordinators, what have you. They're all there to support you. They're all there to answer your questions. So, you know, I think that's really fascinating that especially when you were at Tennessee that you took advantage of that because it's only for those 4 or 5 years in your life where all of that is around you. And then you either go pro and you try to make it there, you do or you don't,
Right.
or you go into the real world. And you know, those people are connected with you forever but you're not in that social situation where they're all around you every day and you can just bounce stuff off of them. So like it's so huge to take advantage of that.
Yeah, because that's the thing I like to tell athletes now is like you have to use the connections while you're hot because yeah, like as an athlete, you might be like, yeah, I'll do it when I finish. But once you leave the building, you're not around them every day. They actually have other athletes that they're focusing on. So not saying not saying you're like not thought about, but they have the next class they're worried about. They have the next recruits or all this and this. So you get kind of lost in that. So that's why it's important to build those connections now. So when you call, they'll pick up the phone like, hey, oh, I remember him. Okay, what do you need? Okay, I got you, or whatever it may be. So I always tell athletes that now.
I never thought of it that way either. Like you gotta keep your head where your feet are. You know, if you want to be great at what you're doing, you gotta keep your head where your feet are. So you gotta be worried about those athletes that are in the building. I mean, life moves fast in college football. I mean, just last year, you know, when I was a player development intern, you know, we had guys like Terry On and Kool-Aid and JC Latham there. Those guys are all in the league
Yeah.
now. We've got new freshmen in there. Half the guys, like I'm in the real world now. It's like half the guys in there I don't even know. Like it turns over quickly. If you're not in that building for 6 months, you walk back in after 6 months and you're like, wow, this is totally different. And that's everywhere, not just Alabama, not just North Carolina.
Yeah, that's so true. And even with the transfer portal now, like they're constantly evaluating new talent, bringing guys in. So that's why it's important to make sure you keep those connections strong. So when you leave, it's easy to call them again.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. No, it's all about how you treat those people, how you build those relationships, no matter where you go afterwards. Um, and so as I met with you several times when I was at Alabama. You know, speaking of, you know, I thought that your position was really interesting. How you work on the academic side when you were there. So we met several times, we talked about player developments, and we discussed player development plans, which I thought was really interesting. So I wanted to ask you, Brandon, what are the elements that go into a successful player development plan at any college?
Yeah, I would say there's three things you can focus on. Obviously, there could be more or there could be less, depending on what you think. But this is how I feel. There's three areas that I like to focus on when I'm programming. So, life skills development piece, you have the community engagement piece, and then the professional development piece. And I'll kind of go into a little bit about each one. But life skills development, you want to think of things like whether it's building your credit, like learning about banking, whether it's hygiene, whatever it may be. Those are things that help build yourself and the life skills you have, what you use now and beyond your playing days. Then also you got the community engagement piece. So that's like what I'm talking about, building relationships with guys in the building, but also with guys out of the building. They're former alumni. There's people in the building community you can do community service with that they'll you can build connections with. So you may need them when you get finished. And there's also alumni that didn't necessarily play football there, but there's also alumni that want to engage with athletes. And so that's the biggest piece with that. And then the professional development piece, I think of like resume building, job etiquette, building your brand. Like 'cause social media is really big now, especially with NIL. So those different things, that's what I feel like all ties into those three areas. And you could go way deep into those three, but that's kind of the surface level of the things I like to think about when I start programming.
No, it's really interesting. You've got to cover all three of those elements. I mean, the life skills part is huge, and I'll ask you a little bit about what that looks like at North
Yeah,
Carolina. But I know that that was a huge point of emphasis at Alabama. Getting that established, professional development. I remember we had several trips when I was at Alabama planned for the athletes. I think we had one that went to Atlanta um, for
yeah,
for some of the players to go up there and network with the companies up in the A, and of course that community engage in peace. I mean, there's always alumni that are more active than others.
yeah.
Like there's some guys that'll be in that building all the time. I mean, I remember being there and just seeing some of the same faces being there engaging with the players. Some you'll never hear from again, but then there's others that like when you're there in that building all the time, you'll see the same faces around, just wanting to meet the guys and help them chart their course to where they're going to end up being, whether it's on the fields or off the field. And so and there's a lot of responsibility that goes into that being a director of player development. So, it's really cool that you get to do that on a daily basis. And so, like, yeah, what do some of those activities look like at UNC? What kind of trips do you have the players take? And how often are you getting them intertwined with the community up there in Chapel Hill?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, we started last summer. I was able to implement a plan. We called it Uncommon. So essentially it's branded off UNC, UNCOMMON. But basically we branded off UNC and I made it where I wanted to do 6 out of the 8 week summer. I want to do 6 sessions. And basically it was all with those 3 areas that I talked about. So some of the things that we brought in like Bank of America. We brought them in and talk about budgeting, credit, and savings. We brought in a part that I thought was needs, we brought in mental health. So our mental health and performance psychology staff, we brought them in to kind of help them learn, hey, how do we handle stress? Or even things like now, how do you handle talking with a coach? Like sometimes there's the tough conversations and each coach is different, but also each athlete is different. So we were trying to give them tools as far as, okay, how do I talk with him if we don't agree on something? Like, do I talk to him on the field or is this something that I go to his office about? Because, sometimes there's a time and place for everything. And we wanted to talk to athletes about that as well. Something else that some other people that we brought in this summer, we talked about taxes. So with certain guys, NIL, with scholarship, that's something that the young guys don't think about. You're coming in as a 17, 18-year-old and you're making however much amount of money, but also that next year you're gonna have to pay taxes on that money. So we were educating them on just the nuances of taxes and tried to keep it really base level. But we wanted to give them some information about that as well. Community engagement, we've done Habitat for Humanity. We visit the Children's Hospital during the season every Friday. So I'll send out a thing for, hey guy, who wants to come? And then we have at least eight, I would say 8 to 12 players come every time. And then sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. But we have that in place as well. And then there are other opportunities as well. So I partner with the student athlete development team on the actual academic side as well to see what they have going on. And we also have someone else in the building, Kevin Donnelly, who's the director of the Coleman Game Plan for Success. So he also has some of that life after football as well with the community service. So we work together on that as well.
I thought that it's really interesting that you mentioned the part about having conversations with coaches, because that's something that when I first came into that space that I didn't understand like just how much goes into the everyday grind and the practice structure. When you're at a Division I football program, like those coaches have to handle game plans, practice plans, developing each and every single player, physically getting them acquainted with the schematics and the playbook that they'll be dealing with throughout the year. And it's like that's got to be the main thing. And so when you're a player who's going through something, battling some adversity, you see a lot with the freshmen and sophomores because
Yeah,
you don't know when you're going to a place. You're 18 years old. Oftentimes, like I mean, we had guys at Bama who were from in-state, but we
yeah,
also had guys coming from Texas, coming from Cali, coming from Florida. Um, you don't know if it's your home or not. Like you don't know if it's where you're supposed to be, the staff you're supposed to be with, and so it can be tough for a while, and like you see in practice, some guys excel and hit their stride, and some guys fall behind and get down on themselves and the development's not where it's supposed to be. And oftentimes on the practice field and in player meetings, it's not the time to have those conversations. And
Yeah.
so it's really interesting to know and cool, refreshing to know that there's guys on each staff like you to have those conversations and help those guys navigate when the answers aren't always clear.
Yeah, and to your point, one thing that I like to do at practice is I like to sit back and observe. So I'm always not necessarily far away, but I like to get a bird's eye view of everything so I can see the different behaviors from players or the different conversations that go on. So I might take a mental note or I might even write it down. Like I have notes in my phone and then I'll just go through and be like, hey, well, this guy seemed like he was this way at practice or they had a weird interaction. Let me go deep dive more into that because those are things that I feel like I'm putting in place for because the coaches, like you said, they have to game plan. They have other recruits they have to talk to. They have to, there's a lot of things they have to get ready for, meetings and whatnot. So I'm here to be able to be that kind of liaison to help the player understand the coach, but also the coach understand the player as well. So that's what I feel like I'm put in place to do.
And that's cool that you do that because I mean practice is like a movie. There's so many different things going on everywhere. Like if you really look around, like you'll observe so many different things going on. Like these two maybe button heads over here. This guy may be struggling with this, but this guy really may be falling into a rhythm with that. These guys are starting to gel well over here. Like it's all
Yeah, it's a
divided
lot.
in different stations, and there's a lot going on everywhere.
Yeah, for sure. Most definitely.
So I want to use that conversation to kind of navigate into this one here, because student athletes are, they've got a lot going on. Their attention is diverted into a lot of different directions for being 18, 19, 20-year-old guys. They've got a lot on their minds, and at the end of the day, they're not the typical college student. And so how do you tailor your approach when it comes to communicating with those athletes and building relationships with them, given like their unique circumstance that they're in?
I would say the number one thing is to meet them where they are. Like you said, everybody comes in on a different level, whether it's a communication piece, maturity piece, academic piece. So you have to meet them where they are, and it might not be where you want them, but also that's why we have these different programs. And I feel like they have me in place to be able to help guide the student athletes. That's the number one thing is you have to meet them where they are. Because I'm telling you, sometimes things might be frustrating dealing with certain players that come in, or you might have guys who are way ahead of the curve so you get a variety of student athletes, but I think that's the biggest piece. Another piece that I would say is also you have to take the time to actually spend with the athletes. Whether that's I think for me, like sometimes I walk in the locker room, like if I have to give whether it's handing out game checks, not game checks, excuse me, but handing out monthly stipend checks or things like that. I'll go in the locker room, or whether they're working out, I might go watch the workout if I have time or like sometimes in practice, like when we have a halftime or when they have a little second, I might go over there and talk and just laugh with the players, catching them at meals. You have to be in the space with them because if you don't, they're going to feel like you're some authority figure and they can't really relate to you. So you have to be in the space with them as opposed to just sitting in my office for 8 to 10 hours a day and them never seeing me. So you have to be where they are. And then the more you do that, the more they're willing to come talk to you about things or reach out. So those are two big things that I would say.
And that's something that I observed when I was at Alabama that you were very good at. Like you were always there. Like I always saw you at various different spots. I'd see you out there on the practice field. I'd see you in the dining hall and in the facility. And so, no, you always did a very good job at immersing yourself. And the players just let their guard down, I think, and that's the biggest thing, especially when it comes to dealing with freshmen, because when they're in a new spot, and if they're coming from a background where they're not trusting much, it can be tough for them to take their guard down with you. And so I think like after a while, it has to come with consistency and seeing you in a variety of different spots. Because I kind of like what you were saying there. Like if you're in your office all day and then you just come down for this or you just come down for that, they're like, yeah, this guy's just here for his agenda. He's just here to give his spiel on this and that, and then he's just gonna go right back up in his office. You're there all the time. They know they can talk with you. They know they can trust you, and so that's another thing I'll use to build off of what we're talking about here is with different guys, maybe guys that are a bit quieter and are afraid to trust new people. And you're somebody at the end of the day that like you really want you got to earn their trust. How do you approach that?
Right. So I think that starts back in recruiting. Now, obviously, when I got here, I wasn't able to really talk with parents with the previous class, but moving forward, meeting with the parents, getting comfortable with them and letting the kids see, hey, my parents are good with you, I'm good with you. But also it's what sometimes I might like I'll do something funny, I might jump in the weight room with them, do something, or just find ways to get guys out of their comfort zone. A cool thing we did with our freshmen, I just remember this as well, is we had about I think it was 4 sessions. Me and Kevin Donnelly, we tag teamed it, and then we would talk about like time management, making good choices. And within, like, obviously that was good information, but it was also a space where it was just the mid years. So it was a space for them to feel comfortable. Like it's not with the whole team where guys are scared to ask questions. And he made it interactive. So we'll ask questions, but it's not just like he might call one person, like getting people comfortable with talking. And they're more apt to talk in front of their class as opposed to the whole team. But you also have some leaders who come in as freshmen. Like we got one guy now, like Jordan Ship. Like he came in, and he's ready to lead right now. But you have other guys who are different, and they might take a little longer, and they're like slow to warm up, I would say. So yeah, that's the biggest thing is just kind of you got to meet them where they are because I can't expect one person to come in here and be the same as the other. So you got to be creative. Like everything's not like linear. Sometimes you might have to go here, you might have to go back a little bit. Like, hey, let's backtrack. Let me not push too much because some guys are like quiet. Like, I don't know if you know Marion Hampton. He's a pretty good running back here at UNC, but when he first got here, he was quiet as a mouse. And I was actually interning. This was before I came to Bama, but I was actually interning on the academic side there before I came back, and he was so quiet. But then when I came back, I had to start working with him with different things, and so he became more apt to talking, and now he's like completely different. So it's just like things like that, and his maturity. It's like it speaks volumes of like how much if you're with them in their space, they can really change. You can really develop relationships, and that's what I like about it, honestly.
Oh, when you can watch one guy grow from when they first came in, and then 2 3 years down the road, they're a completely different dude. They're a more confident, more grounded guy, more secure, more expressive. Like that's why you're in it, and you've got to be in it a couple of years to see that. Like you won't see that in your first year, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
you're in that for a couple of years, and you see it play out for certain guys. That's essentially that's why you're in it. I mean, that's a really gratifying feeling. And so the last thing I'll leave with here, since I see that the time is starting to run out a little bit, um, what's one piece of advice that you have for people like myself and others in the sports industry that want to get involved on that player development side? Like, what's the best way to put yourself in a position to where you can eventually have a job like that someday?
Okay, so I think it's a few things, but the number one thing, kind of even what I said is me as an athlete, build connections. And when I say connections, it was people in the athletic world space. So it might not, sometimes you might not get a hold of somebody in director of player development, but you might get a hold of somebody else in the office. I think with my story, like I didn't start in player development. I knew I wanted to do it, but I didn't jump right into it. Like I did academics, got into the collegiate space. And then after that, I took a chance, interviewed, and I got an opportunity here. So I would say build connections because I was here as an academic advisor, here in UNC as an intern, and I never thought I would be back as the director of player development. Like I went to Alabama, worked in academics, thought I liked it, but it wasn't really my speed. And I just seen the director of player development job come open here at UNC, and I was like, hey, why not give it a shot? I've been there. I think I did a pretty good job. Like I worked with the football team, so the building knew me, so that gave me an opportunity to be able to come back. You never know where your journey might lead you. So I would say build connections. Another thing is don't be afraid to reach out to people that like that you feel like won't respond. You never know, whether it's through LinkedIn or whether you might get their number from someone else in the building. Don't be afraid to reach out. Like the worst thing they could do is not respond, but they also could respond. So like there's nothing bad, there's nothing wrong with that. Guys are busy and it might just be that one day they remember, hey, he did text me about one thing. Let me see if you're still interested. So you would never know. So those I would say building relationships and don't be afraid to reach out. Those are two biggest things as well. And also I'd also go as far to say is don't be afraid to start as an intern in another department. Like whether you're getting in, you might be equipment manager. Obviously, that might not be exactly what you want to do, but getting in the building is the biggest hurdle that you have to jump because so many people want to be in college athletics. So if you can get in the building, it might be equipment manager, it might be part of video, it might be a grad assistant, like anything. Just be able to don't be afraid to take an opportunity that may get you ultimately to where you want to be because you never know where you may end up. I promise you, I didn't think I was going to end up back here, but I'm here now.
Oh, absolutely. Like any way to get yourself in the door, get yourself involved, and just around the operation. Like, when you're around the operation, regardless of what it is, it changes everything. I mean, that's one thing I can really attest to when I intern in player development was just being around everything. Last thing with the players earlier, like you're around nutrition and sports science and strength and conditioning and player development. You're around it all the time. And then, yeah, like just kind of building off what you were saying, those relationships wherever you are, they're important to build. You never want to burn any bridges because you don't
Yeah, that is true. It is
you don't
true.
know we don't know who you're going to see again, right? You don't know who you're going to see again down the line, and you don't know where you
That's
can
true.
end up again. So a relationship you built in one place, it can result in you going back there, or if you network with somebody at one spot, they can move to another. You go to that same spot because of them. You just it's one of those things like you said, the networking aspect is so important, whether you're a player or
Huge.
whether you're somebody in the industry.
No, that's huge. Yeah,
Well,
for
I
sure.
thank you so much for coming on here today, Brandon. This was awesome. I think people learned so much today about player development, what it looks like at UNC, and what you do on a daily basis, how you approach it. So, BK, really salt of the earth guy. Glad to have you on here. This is awesome.
I appreciate it. It was a pleasure.
Yes, sir. Go Tar Heels.
Thanks. Go Tar Heels.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you and the time that you took out of your day to watch the video. And if you enjoyed it, please be sure to like the video and share it, as well as subscribe to the Era. The more likes and subscribers I get on this channel, the more resources I can attain, and the more resources I can attain, the more value I can provide to you, the viewer. And that is how I show my appreciation for you for the time that you devote to watching my videos. So thank you so much, and have a great day.